on the ground. Great job. And the team has just returned from those exercises. And so when you hear this term, the training bubble, it does work. You got to build in more time, but having the discipline of the process, but most of all, it's our people. It's our soldiers, our non-commissioned officers, and our officers leading this effort. It's very effective. So let me transition to the next slide. And this is where I really want to talk on the return of short-range air defense to the maneuver force. We go to the next slide. And so what you've just heard me focus on the Tobruk legacy is really what we've been focusing on the last couple of years is defense of fixed and semi-fixed assets. But as we need to be able to project power at great distance, it's also going to be incumbent on us to protect the maneuver force. And we got to be aware that we've got to be flexible enough to change priorities and to weight the effort at the operation in some progress. And so we'll still account for critical and semi-fixed assets, but we've got to be flexible to ensure that we support these large-scale ground combat operations. And so my first point up front is relationships matter. Relationships matter. And General Carver, you are absolutely right when you said that, because at the end of the day, we've got to have those relationships with the BCT commander, that battery commander, that battalion commander, with the division commander. And I tell you what, this has already started. We're already building that culture back into these maneuver formations with our rotational, SHORAD battery, Bravo 1st to 204th. But another step, and this was a great effort led by Lieutenant Colonel Todd Daniels and now Lieutenant Colonel Abe Osborne and Command Sergeant Major Palmer of 548A. What they've done is they've aligned their SHORAD batteries with the BCTs. And specifically in Europe, we have the 173rd Infantry Brigade Combat Team, and we also have the 2nd Cavalry Regiment. And with these units, having that habitual relationship, getting used to that commander, platoon leaders operating their environment. But also, you've got to build the relationship with the key conduit in those brigade combat teams, and that's the Atom Cell. And with that, quite a bit of work has been going on, and that kind of leads to the next point about expectations versus reality. We're moving fast, and we've got to make sure that we have the opportunities to get our leaders, the education and give them the time to practice this. And so I know we have leaders out there, that are in the CCC and the BOLIC. And so I think General Carver once again said it pretty well with, you can't be that potted plant in the headquarters. It is intimidating to get in there. I'll share you my first experience in the BCT. Was actually at the division headquarters in 1993 when 3ID was still over here, and I'm trying to engage with the 8080O. And then here you are up there talking to the G3 in the division. It's not easy. So you got to practice that. But at the end of the day, you are the subject matter expert. And that's one of the lessons learned that we're seeing right now is that we've got, maneuver battalion and brigade commanders that have not worked for short-range air defense in over 15 years. And so at the end of the day, you're the subject matter expert. Being able to, enforce and educate them on the principles of air defense, mass, mix, mobility, and integration. And the other pieces, I would have those leaders while you're at Fort Sill. There's great resources there. The U.S. Army Air Defense School has done quite a bit to build capacity. One of the other requirements is we put non-dedicated air defenders, Stinger teams, in the brigade combat teams. There's a training course at Fort Sill. I recommend you get over there, get those training materials that you're using. You can use that as you could get when you get into the unit. And we got to be able to balance both that experience for the Patriot and for the SHORAD. And there's also an Atom Cell course in the Air Defense School. Colonel Harrison and Command Sergeant Major Gray can assist you guys with getting some of those materials as well. And so you can do that before you arrive at the unit, and I highly recommend that. But some other things that, we're seeing, these units are engaging not only in, these habitual relationships, but we're getting them into joint and combined air defense exercises at the joint multinational training centers, so readiness centers. So that's JMRC, which is a rapid. And back to General Carver once said, reps and sets. That's true. We've got to continue to train these maneuver formations. But we're finding out though is there's definitely a proficiency gap, not only at the division, at the BCT. And so it's us as air defenders. We're going to be leading that effort to mitigate these, proficiency issues, the knowledge, and we obviously we can discuss this later on in some question and answer session. But as we modernize the SHORAD formation, proposed systems should be able to integrate with the existing C2 systems at the BCT and the division, but also it's got to be interoperable with IBCS and our ADA specific systems. So let's go to our last slide right now, and that is some ongoing initiatives. And then the first piece is what's been systemic through my whole brief, is being able to enhance relationships and interoperability with our allies. So one of the initiatives over here in Europe, that some of you have been stationed here before, we've got a lot of bilateral, trilateral exercises, and growing to larger, like you just saw with Tobruk Legacy. And so what we're working on is getting to a NATO-recognized annual air and missile defense exercise. The vision is something like what we've seen with Roving Sands, and that was a great initiative for the 32nd AAMDC to bring back Roving Sands, because a lot of our allies over here participated in that. So what we're trying to do is establish an event like that. We still have these exercises, Joint Project Optic Windmill with the Dutch and the Germans. We have a live fire coming up in Crete, Greece, with almost all of the legacy Patriot units here in Europe doing a live fire